You know, I'm not much of a traveler. I mean, I've been to Canada I've been to Montreal 5 times. 4 times to drive people to the airport. Okay? Let's see. When I worked for GE in California, I got into Mexico once for 4 hours. And I did get a chance to, I've been out of the country otherwise. I had a chance to go to Rome once, and I've had a chance to go to Ireland once. When I was in Rome, it was a gathering let's say, to visit Catholic sites and Christian sites in and around central Italy. And it was a wonderful time. I enjoyed that very much. We were staying at a monastery the Passionist Fathers were running that was not far from the Colosseum. I say that only because some of you might have had the chance to be out that way. And the subway system in Rome is not very extensive, but there is a stop by the Colosseum. And on those hot July afternoons, it's better to ride the subway than to walk. But I remembered I'm on this crowded subway train with a couple of my friends, and there's this really animated conversation going on about, say, 5 yards away. There's this very quiet, solitary fellow with his arms crossed like this, and he's smoking a cigar. And there's a couple of people who are pointing to him, and then pointing to this sign on the wall, on the subway car. And I nudged my friend, what's going on? He said, they're trying to tell him to put his cigar up because the sign says no smoking. And the sign says, you don't smoke on the subway train. And so his comment, he said, well, what's the problem? He says, well, the old man is telling him, are you smoking? You read the sign. You're not smoking. What are you worried about? And they let it go at that. So what can I guess you had to see it to believe it. But, you wake up some mornings and there's sometimes you see something you don't expect to see or you don't expect to hear. This is the Easter season. And we find the disciples are in the midst of following Jesus daily. They're hanging on his every word as he travels. And they try and take his example. They listen to what he's saying. And Jesus is talking to the disciples about what it means to become good disciples. He wants to be people who love, who serve, who heal people, who forgive people. And Jesus wants the disciples to treat people the way he treats them. Jesus wants the disciples to see the world the way he sees the world. He wants the disciples to love the world the way he loves the world. In other words, disciples, follow my example. Do the same. Do what I'm doing. Well, this one day, Jesus says to them, I have this new commandment for you. Now, the disciples probably woke up this morning, well, what new are we going to see today? Jesus has a new commandment for us. And the commandment is, if you love one another, I want you to love one another even as I have loved you. By this, all will know that you are my disciples. So love one another. It's got to be one of the more challenging things that Jesus has asked us to do. Now, but going a step further, aside from the challenge of being someone who loves all the time, Jesus said at the end there, he said that he wanted the disciples to do this because the people were going to be paying attention. By all of this, the people will know that you are my disciples. That is, Jesus is giving the ability to everyone else to observe what the disciples are doing. Are they being good disciples? Are you living what Jesus is living? Are you treating each other as Jesus would treat people? Are you caring and making sacrifices for each other the way Jesus did? The people then can watch the disciples and kind of draw their own conclusions about whether or not the disciples are good disciples, and should I follow the example of what the disciples are doing if they're not doing it well themselves? Jesus is telling the disciples that the way they are disciples is an example for others. So you should be a good example for others. Because people are going to watch and decide, should I follow too? Should I listen to Jesus? Should I follow too? So this is part of what's going on today. And something that's just good for us to remember is that, it's not just the disciples who are watching, or not just the disciples who are being watched. Hey folks, I want you to fit in your favorite word for the way you live. We are called by Jesus to witness, to give example, to advertise, to advocate about what it means to be a good disciple, all by a good follower of Jesus, all by our actions. The whole world can see. And on a day-by-day or hour-by-hour basis, that could be a pretty humbling thing. We might sit back and say, Lord, I wish I could do better what I'm called to do. Lord, I wish I could follow you more perfectly. I will try my best. I've not had a good morning. I will try to be a better disciple this afternoon or tomorrow. Now, what's God doing? Well, I could say God's watching us too, but I guess I want to say maybe more fundamentally that God is putting great trust in us. God is putting everything on our shoulders as followers of him. It's almost like someone who's saying, hey, I'm going to bet the mortgage on this. It's something that's very important. God is putting this all on the line for us. He's not leaving it to his son to do. He's leaving it to us to do. He's leaving it for us to witness to his son's goodness in the world. He's leaving it to us to be people of prayer, us to be people of service, us to be people of charity and love, because the whole world will come to see how well we live what it means to be a disciple. And that's important, because we have to think about this. Think about our neighbors for a minute. After they see you, after they've been around you, after they've been thinking about what you've been doing and talking about things that you've done, are they going to say to one another, hey, is he or she a good disciple of Jesus? How would your coworkers or your classmates at school assess you? What about the relatives you had over for dogs and burgers last Sunday and for a picnic in the backyard? What did they think? Would they say, no, he or she is a disciple of the Lord who truly, truly loves other people? In other words, are we proclaiming Jesus by the way we love one another, by the way we live our lives? Now, I might sit back and say, that sounds like a lot to ask for. And we're probably going to get some pushback, even in ourselves. It's not so much that having others watching what we're doing is an intrusion or like a violation of our privacy. I think instead it's a reminder that Jesus has asked us to follow him. Jesus has asked us to advance his way of life in the world. He's asking us to proclaim his life, his word, and his way. To love one another as I have loved you. And you might sit back saying, Lord, I can do this for a lot of people, but there are some people I find hard to love. What if I find people who are hard to love? What if I find people who don't like me? How could that be possible? People wouldn't like me. But how could that be possible? Are there people that I have wounded, or people who have hurt me? I'm having a hard time getting over that, Lord, because there's something between us. And I think sometimes we get caught up in the feelings and the emotions of moments like that. But let me go a little deeper on this. I don't think Jesus is talking about a love that's dependent on how I feel or where my emotions are today. That's not how Jesus is asking me to love the world. That sometimes is, if I want to get a little bit like our English class a second, I think that's when we're treating love like it's a noun. Folks, Jesus is asking us to do this differently. He wants us to treat love like a verb, an action word. To do, to be present for one another. An eternal kind of love, not just for the moment, not just for right now. Because let's remember, as the Father has loved me, so I love you. The Father loved us yesterday, today, and he will love us tomorrow. Jesus is calling us to love an always kind of love. Just as God is concerned for our eternal well-being, we should be loving our neighbor. We should be concerned about the well-being of our sisters and brothers right now. Just like we heard in our reading from the Revelation book today, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, a new Jerusalem, adorned like a bride for her husband. I've been your parish priest for 31 years. I think I've witnessed about 600 marriages in that span of time. I have seen adorned brides walk down the aisle of churches. That ancient spiritual image that Christ is the groom and that we the people, we the church are the bridegroom of Christ. The ways in which we can be adorned speak to the ways in which we are faithful, we are loving, we are attentive to one another. We are people who love our sisters and brothers just as the Father has loved us. All those good things, all those loving acts, these are things that adorn our lives. That's us, folks. That's you, that's me. It's the church. We are adorned like a bride in the ways in which we treat each other, love each other, care for each other. The disciples sometimes wondered something new they would hear from Jesus that day. Maybe we have those moments too. I told you the story about being in Rome and watching an old man have a conversation with men who wanted to put a cigar out on the subway car. Didn't think I'd see that either. There are times when I realize I'm being called to love as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Live on in my love. We are called to love one another. May my life be opened so that I can see that I'm called to love. Maybe something I didn't think I'd do today. The Lord is placing the opportunity before me each day. The Lord does this for all of us. We are all called to love and serve the Lord and one another. May we come to love the Father, love our neighbors,